All right, here we go. Moving right along to English. Teaching writing. Can you tell I've been on different pages all day today? I've been teaching English today. We want to look at the syllabus and see that we are in week 13 of a 15-week course. Oh my goodness, this is just about done. I mean, the fat lady's gonna sing, right? And we are looking at I want to look at this week's work, but I also kind of want to scan ahead and see how this is all going to come together. Most of our reading from this point out is going to be kind of exploring websites. I'm going to encourage you to go back to our resources and reread things that maybe you skimmed over and didn't have time to really totally dig into. Some of these websites have many layers and they can take you down many rabbit trails. And so I encourage you to go back and re-explore a few spaces that we have at least touched on in the course. Um, After this week, we have a short week with Easter break, and we're working basically on wrapping up our wiki, the portfolio. So everything is kind of feeding into this last push. So I want to kind of begin with the end in mind. On the last week, the only thing we're going to add is just some editing to the wiki. And what I'd like this to be, again, I keep saying this over and over, so sorry for about the repetition, but this is supposed to be a resource for you especially to use in your first year of teaching, and it's something I want to be able to share out. I'm hoping to use OneNote or some other tool. If you have another recommendation, if you're more comfortable with Google Docs or something like that, we could use that. I like OneNote because of the organization tabs, but you're feel free to chime in back to me in an email, any preference. The idea is I want other people to be able to take the work that you've done and possibly use it along with theirs. And obviously that also requires you giving permission because you have created this material. But mostly what we're working towards is adding one last piece to this wiki, and then we'll edit it for all of the other weeks, kind of in one big chunk. So what are we doing for this last piece, and what is our assignments for this week? Okay, here we go. In the Atwell text, there is a appendix of resources, and just lots and stuff. Go explore. That's your reading assignment. I'm going to also include a PDF link in your outside links section that's entitled Best Practices in Teaching Writing, and another one called 30 Ideas for Teaching Writing. Again, this could be a little bit like drinking out of a fire hose, information overload, but I feel like I want to give you as many things as possible. I just added this, so if you open your syllabus, you won't see it. But I'm on a couple different mailing lists, and one of them is the We Are Teachers website. What I like about it is, as the title suggests, it is a site that is people who are actually in the field and working in similar situations to what you'll be working in, and it's them sharing out on their topics. It's cross content, so it's not just limited to writing, but I think it has a lot of possible uses for your classroom. In your future classroom. For the discussion board this week, I wanted to bring up this bad boy topic because it's one of my favorites. I'll never forget just being so overwhelmed with, and still feeling this way occasionally, about how fast I get work back to students. We know, pedagogically speaking, that students need feedback as promptly as we can give it. And we know that from our own perspective as students, that we kind of want immediate feedback, right? We like, and you think about texting, I mean, nobody waits for a letter in the mail anymore. Very rarely do we. We want that kind of instant gratification stuff, and to some degree students need to learn to deal, but there is some educational implications that once they've done it, it's really fresh in their mind, and so if you can correct it and re-guide them right away, they're still on the same page as you are, whereas if you wait weeks and weeks, they've moved on. That paper is history to them. So what are you going to do with this question? When will I get my paper back? What is an appropriate amount of time to spend on each paper and when you're grading them? And what guidelines or goals will you have in terms of returning written work to students. How do you plan to manage that piece in your classroom? As we're winding up this class, if you notice, we're changing topics to classroom management and workload management. I mentioned that last week. What I want you to start thinking about is we have some really great ideas, but what realistically can we really schedule in, and what is reasonable when we're balancing? In theory, it's good for students to have immediate feedback. In practice, what can I really manage? That's what I want you to explore. Funny story on that. Probably about 8 years into my teaching experience, I had been in the same school for about 5 of those, and by this time I had 1 or 2 children, and I had a student kind of disrespectfully say, "When are we going to get those papers back?" And very honestly, they hadn't been given to me for very long. And before I could even say anything, because I hated that question because I felt like I'd failed them, kind of a funny hang up I had, one of my students from the back of the room goes, "She has a life." And had been a weekend, and it was kind of funny to me because it reminded me that it's okay for students to know that you have a life, but there's also a professional responsibility. So you figure it out, you talk about it in the discussion board, and there's no wrong answers. Just want to hear your thoughts on this. Okay, for the blog, we're exploring some of these resources. If you have other resources that you want to look at, that's fine. But again, I want you to share back. What do you find? I'd like you to look at these just because there's lots of ideas here, but if there's any other sources you want to bring in, I'm not offended. You're going to make a graphic organizer or list of your top 10 practices based on how you see them fitting into your teaching style and objectives. So justify how you're going to use them from a teaching style perspective, as well as a writing objective or a reading objective. There is going to be a guest speaker video this week, and I saved her for last because she talks about a unique way of classroom management using a learning management system for a blended classroom approach in a traditional school setting. And so she's actually a teacher I used to work with in Northwest Ohio. Her name is Rebecca Dattisman, and she'll be sharing with you about blending your classroom using a learning management system. So that's going to be another idea. I forgot to tell you about that earlier. Okay, and then finally we've got this wiki going on, and here's what your last part of your wiki is going to be. You're going to create a monthly plan. I'd like you to use like a calendar page or something that is easy for you to access. I don't want to define that for you, but something that really shows you the big picture. And I'd like you to rough in a rotation of student writing, conferencing, teaching, grading, pacing work with a sensitivity to the different learners involved and your workload as a teacher. You can include reading as well in these. Maybe you want to even kind of sketch in like a daily plan. I'm not looking for big lesson plans. I'm looking for a calendar of what you would hope to do. You can use, and I would encourage you to use, the 4 lessons that you have been working on this whole course and show how they're all going to work together. Is it going to be something that's done in a month? Is this a whole semester worth of work? How is it really going to pace out? Look at all of the stuff you've created and put it in a calendar. Show how it's going to pace. Now, maybe you did not intentionally maybe the lessons you've created are not going to be back-to-backs. Fine, make your calendar, show us that with your calendars. Show us how you're going to really teach out on a calendar basis. And let's not worry about holidays, okay? Don't worry about, well, what if there's a day off here, a day off there? Don't worry about that. Just straight up assuming that we have full weeks of school and how the different lessons will fill in together. And you can put general things like following this unit, there will be a 2-week emphasis on reading, which will then build into my next writing unit, and then you can have several different calendars. So you might have 4 different calendars, one for each of your writing units, or it might just be one big calendar. And don't worry about how much time you cover. I want more careful consideration put into how much time will it take me to get to my objective with each of these, to kind of get a perspective on with all this work I created, all these things, all these ideas I generated, how much class time will they really take up? I think we sometimes worry about that. I tend to overplan, and I tend to stuff my class periods full. My students, one time they got comfortable enough with me to kind of joke with me about it and say, "You realize that you're yelling down the hallway what our assignments are." And actually, one student was just saying, I can't do that. I need more time to process that. And it was a good wake up call for me because I was so worried about letting them have every second of class time that I didn't really leave enough time for them to process what I wanted them to do for next time. So, those are some things to consider as you're creating your calendar. I want to talk a moment just about some classroom management, workload management ideas and concepts. I think arguably writing teachers have one of the heaviest workloads when we think about how much evaluation and how long it takes us to evaluate the work that we create. Jokingly, one of my friends said, well, if you wouldn't assign so much, you wouldn't have so much to grade. And there is something to that. I think that one of my errors as a early on teacher was, again, because I wanted to keep students so engaged and so busy, is I ended up creating a lot of work that I felt like I had to give them full feedback on everything they did. And it took me kind of stepping back and saying, okay, what was the point of this activity? Is it something that, one, can be simply a peer graded activity, or simply a completion grade? Or is it more of a formative thing? How much detail do I need to go into it? I think I've mentioned before, one of the ways that I managed, I did a lot of journaling with my students. I had them write, we call them SWATs, spontaneous writing and thinking. And this was mostly for sophomores that I used this activity. I would have a writing prompt on the board, and they would have to respond in a journal entry each day to the writing prompt, the SWAT. And I didn't want to miss anything, especially if the student did like a little bit of a call for help or something on an open journaling day. I didn't want to miss that, and so I felt really like I needed to read everything. But I had 120 students total and 5 different classes I was prepping because it was a small school. It was a public school, but I was teaching English 10, English, 2 sections of English 10, 2 sections of English 12, a section of a combined 11, 12 that was more for non-college bound students. I did the newspaper and the yearbook, and I taught creative writing. That was a lot, okay? I doubt you'll ever have to teach that much, thankfully. But what I ended up doing is having students choose the journal entries that they wanted me to notice. So that gave them, first of all, some self-moderation, right? They had to kind of reflect on which of their entries was the best, and they would just tab them with a sticky note. And I made sure to then give them feedback on those 2. And honestly, the rest I did a counting game. I just made sure that they kept them accountable. And I kept them accountable daily by walking around while they were journaling, not to hawk over them, but just to make them aware that I was aware, and also to kind of moderate or mediate for students who were really struggling to put words to paper. I'll brag for a second, not really on me, but on my school district. We had about a 97 to 100% pass rate for first-time OGT attempts for sophomores. And very honestly, I had a principal question the amount of time I was spending on journaling, and so I eased up on it one year, and students didn't write as well on the OGT. I really believe there's a connection to consistent and constant practice. So how do we manage that? One of the other ways that I've learned to manage is by setting a timer and only allowing myself a certain amount of time to respond. I also set kind of a standard. What am I really looking for? I'm just grading a set of papers right now for a comp class, a college comp class, and I was really looking for synthesis. And so honestly, I'm not looking for all those little editing errors. If I see something that sticks out, I'll say something. But at this point, they've already pre-written, they've already done discussion boards, they've already done peer editing. I don't need to edit them as much as I need to make sure that as college writers, they know how to synthesize their sources. And so I hold myself accountable to giving them that kind of feedback. Finally, I want you to strongly consider what you can do to use internet and online capabilities to help you with your workload management. So keep that in mind as you watch my guest speaker. I think that could be a really key piece for many of you as you launch out into your own classrooms. Have a great week.